If gold is the gold standard right now for holding money in a strategic reserve along with some other foreign currencies and stuff, I think it's perfectly suitable for Bitcoin to be in that position because it's just more robust and it's more future proof. And, I think the fact that we're seeing pension funds who historically have some of the longest investment horizons and lowest risk tolerances of any investment entities on planet Earth, I think the fact that we're seeing pension funds buy Bitcoin is the signal that everybody else needs to understand and respect like that Bitcoin is legit. Because 5 years ago, if you had told me pension funds would be buying Bitcoin, I would have told you you're crazy. So I think it's totally reasonable that governments will start buying it and not just these kind of like smaller governments, like big ones. And then once that starts, I think it's like game theory takes effect and then the great Bitcoin race is on.
Welcome to Object, Subject, Form, a series of conversations exploring the human side of creativity at the evolving intersection of art, technology, and finance. In this episode, I'm joined by Valko, early Bitcoin investor, crypto operator, and NFT collector. Since recording this conversation, Valko has stepped into a new role as Chief of Staff at World Liberty Financial, a decentralized finance platform launched in 2024 to simplify access to digital assets and decentralized finance. As Bitcoin continues its dominance as one of the best performing assets of the last decade, outpacing traditional investments by a wide margin, I've received many questions from people trying to understand what's driving these returns and how crypto might fit into their portfolio strategy. So I asked Valko to come on and go back to basics with me to unpack why Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies truly matter, the thinking behind his bold decision to be all in on crypto, and why paying attention to this technology matters now more than ever. Valko, welcome, and thanks for spending time with me this morning to talk about what I think is probably your favorite topic, and it's definitely one of mine. I think everyone remembers when they discovered Bitcoin and crypto, and I've been on this crazy journey since 2017 myself, thanks to a very good friend of mine, and I know you've been here much, much longer. And my hope today is that we can go back to some basics and talk about why people should really care about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies as a technology, and the importance in one's portfolio decision.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. It seems like just yesterday we met and hit it off on that bus ride, but look at us now.
Yeah, and we'll get into that one a bit later. So unless you've been living under a rock for, let's say, the past 5 to 10 years, most people should have at least heard about Bitcoin, crypto, and more recently NFTs, the good and the bad. And I've definitely had many conversations with friends who've had investment interest each bull cycle, which tends to happen at these stages of the cycle. Signals show we're now in one of those, and right on cue, more questions are being asked. But perhaps not enough people understand why it really does matter beyond the headlines and beyond the number going up. And when we last met in person, we were having a conversation about investing, and you told me you were all in on crypto. So no stocks, no Magnificent Seven, no mutual funds, just all in on crypto. And I know some very bullish people in the space. The general guide is don't risk too much, on average 10% of your portfolio. So your comment really did catch my attention. And so I have two questions for you. Why on earth are you all in? And why should we be paying attention to what is happening here?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think ever since I started making, real money, kind of working in college, I was investing. It wasn't until I would say the tail end of college, right before I got into NFTs, that I'd kind of made this mental shift to go all in. But like initially going all in, it was kind of just a financial thing. I had been looking at the Bitcoin prices, and the trend was pretty clear. Like it was without a doubt the best asset of all time in terms of its returns. But of course, any savvy, like financial minded person or investor knows that it's not just about the returns you get, it's about what risks you took, along the way. It's about your risk adjusted returns. And so I kind of looked into it further from that lens. And I was always interested in finance. I went to music school, but I kind of always had this like appreciation for long term investing and like that Warren Buffett school of thought.
Yeah.
And so I was looking into Bitcoin and I was like, okay, like how good is this on a risk adjusted basis? And like it turns out like even when you factor that in, Bitcoin is one of the best assets of all time. So, I'm talking in terms of like its Sharpe ratio and its correlation with other markets and hedge against the dollar. So my initial all in mentality was purely from a like, if you're going to accumulate an asset and dollar cost average into something with your portfolio, like what's the best investment? And very quickly I came to the conclusion that that was Bitcoin. But over time, my all-in mentality like shifted away from, oh, this is just a good investment
Mm.
to, oh my God, like this is the future. This is the future of commerce. This is the future of digital ownership. And like this is where I want to spend my time. So for me, it's not about being just all in with my bag. I'm all in with my time, like my career, and frankly my fulfillment in life. I think it's like the Japanese have that saying ikigai. What do
Yes.
you love? What are you good at? What does the world need, and what can you be paid for? And to me, that's really helping advance the transition to a future where the world runs on blockchain. I firmly believe blockchain is the most freedom enabling technology in the world, and it's about far more than money and making money for me now. It's about redefining money and frankly redefining the entire way like we interact with one another, period.
So, for someone new to this, perhaps seeing the headlines, perhaps beginning some research, starting to pay attention, where should someone start and why is it so important to think about this seriously? And why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll answer the second question first. Like, why should you take this seriously? Why does crypto matter? So I think there are a few layers to it. And unfortunately, a lot of it gets muddied with all the noise in this space and, scam artists coming to this space. And of course, the like rampant greed fueled gambling and speculative culture. I don't personally participate in any of that. Don't own any meme coins or any alts. I keep my portfolio pretty strict to like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and CryptoPunks. But yeah, I think if you like put that stuff aside and you think about like what Bitcoin did, like Bitcoin fundamentally introduced this idea of digital ownership. And I think in a world that's increasingly digital ownership is kind of a big deal. In many ways, you could say it's the bedrock of the digital frontier or the metaverse or whatever you want to call it. Now, of course, like Bitcoin introduced digital ownership for like money, right? Like just like the internet and email are these like public protocols that freed information. Bitcoin freed money and value. It's the world's first public digital payments infrastructure. For the first time, I could send you $1 digitally without permission from anybody, just like I could give you a paper dollar and nobody can stop us. Until Bitcoin, that was actually impossible, which is pretty profound if you think about it. But, Bitcoin obviously has its limitations. Like common objections are like, oh, it's really, energy intensive, or oh, there's like only so much bandwidth and transactions per second. It's not actually good as a currency. It's just a good store of value. And I think those are all like valid criticisms for the most part. Bitcoin sort of had this sense of like, cool, it's the world's first public digital payments infrastructure. It introduced digital ownership, but of a fungible thing. Like, what can we really do with this like magic internet money? It's just like, it's almost like a dumb rock. Like, what can we do with this rock? Like, well, I don't know. And so what really kind of put me all in on crypto, or really like caught my interest post Bitcoin, was Ethereum and NFTs, right? So like you have the dawn of digital ownership, which I think is increasingly important in a world that's increasingly digital. So if Bitcoin introduced digital ownership, I would say, Ethereum and NFTs really unleashed it. You really had like now the dawn of programmable money. And that is what kind of made my head explode as a young adult. Because I think until you really do a trustless transaction on the internet with a stranger, it's hard to really understand the power of it. But once you kind of go through that transaction, like you're selling me an NFT, I'm guaranteed to get the NFT, you're guaranteed to get the 1 ETH. Until you feel that, it's hard to really understand why this is so powerful.
I know exactly what you're saying. Like the first transaction I ever did, purchasing Ethereum, purchasing Bitcoin, it was actually really magical, even though you didn't understand exactly how that was going to land in your account. It's not like buying a stock or sending someone money on Zelle where it was instant. There was a little delay, and you kind of check in your account to, see if it's landed yet. And then sending crypto to someone else, like sending a little bit of Ethereum to someone, just like you would send an email. I mean, there was a little bit of, I would call it like nervousness or trauma associated with those initial transactions because it was so early, and I just took somebody's advice and just started to do it, started to trade. Obviously did my research for a couple of months and went down a rabbit hole. I didn't just like start putting money into something, but even then it was still not as widespread as it is now. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about until you actually do the transaction, it's quite difficult to understand how magical it really is.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the analogy I like to tell some of my, non-crypto friends is a gumball machine uses the mechanical laws of the universe to yield a gumball unto you and a quarter unto the gumball seller, right? And that happens trustlessly. You don't have to trust the machine. The machine doesn't have to trust you. It just happens thanks to physics. Smart contracts and Ethereum and the dawn of programmable money basically did the same thing, but instead of using the mechanical laws of the universe, they're using the digital laws of the universe, code and cryptography, to guarantee transactions happen a certain way. And I think that is like incredibly powerful. And again, until you use this infrastructure, it's hard to really understand the power of that. But I'm hoping that people will start to see that with some of these little things like the Bitcoin ETFs, right? Like now for the first time, you have a publicly traded financial product that anybody with a computer and an internet connection can now like enter in the wallet address and be like, oh, cool. The piggy bank does have the amount of money it's supposed to have. You can't do the same thing for a gold ETF, which is actually insane if you think about it. Instead, you have to kind of trust these people, the big four, the auditors, guys with special hats and special stamps that stamp papers and say, trust me, bro. But we don't really know it's there. And it's actually impossible to prove ownership of that in real time in the way you can with like the Bitcoin ETFs and their corresponding wallet addresses. And I'm hoping that, for those who don't get on chain, that maybe they'll start to see and understand the power of this technology through, stuff like that.
And would you say the transparency is key here? I mean, you deposit your cash into a bank. You're not really sure if there's a catastrophe and there's a bank run like we've seen in the past, is your money going to actually still be there? And with the transparency with, wallet addresses and being able to trace and actually know that the capital is there for you to withdraw, would you say that that's one of the benefits as well?
Yeah, look, I think, transparency is a funny thing in crypto. I'd say there's like, to me, three core pillars of crypto. Decentralization. So like no single point of failure. Nobody has God mode. Trustlessness, which was kind of going back to the gumball machine analogy before. Don't trust, verify, a way for strangers to interact online without having to trust one another. That's really powerful. And then permissionlessness, which is anybody can participate, no matter your gender, your religion, your financial background, your political affiliation, where you were born. None of that matters because it is permissionless and open to all. So those to me are the three non-negotiable elements of the Web3 and crypto ethos. Now, I would say the like sometimes Y of the vowels, right? You know, like A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. The sometimes Y to me is transparency because I think in many instances, transparency is great. You know, if you wanted to run a nonprofit on chain, I think that's great. If you're a public company and you want to prove your financial statements, I think that's great. But where transparency sucks is, you know, maybe you're a creator and you don't want your fans to know how much money you're making. Maybe you're a fund manager and people pay you to allocate money for them.
Right.
If they can just see where you're investing, they're just going to copy trade you, right? Maybe you're a consultant. You don't want people to steal your clients, right? Maybe you're sending your mom money. Maybe your mom's sending you money. You know, maybe you're buying weird things on the internet that you shouldn't be buying or that you should be buying and people might shame you or make fun of you for it, right? There's all these reasons where transparency is actually a bad thing. So I think as the blockchain becomes more readable, then people will start to understand the importance and need for privacy because, you know, right now I would say the Achilles heel of crypto, in my opinion, is that, you know, it's pseudo-anonymous and it's never been easier to follow the money. So when I think about transparency, it's super powerful, but it's also super dangerous.
Yeah, and security as well.
100%.
Which leads me to another question actually about being anonymous in this space. Obviously, there are a lot of high profile, high net worth individuals interacting on the timeline on a daily basis. And so being anonymous can have its pros and I'm sure have its cons. You know, being doxxed, so to speak, where people know who you are, does have its benefits of perhaps building profile and building trust. And so do you recommend functioning with anonymity when entering this space?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, right now it's never easier to follow the money. But simultaneously, there's a lot of value in having a reputation, whether that's hello, like I'm insert my IRL name, or hi, I'm insert my wallet address, which has a history and a reputation, right? So there's like this weird struggle of like, you want to prove certain things, but you might not want to prove everything. And so I think it's important for everybody to have their like, you know, kind of public facing doxed wallet where maybe they use that to prove that they own the NFT that's in their profile picture. But I think they should absolutely keep their net worth and their vault, as it were, and their broader holdings completely siloed and separate. Not because they're doing anything fishy, but because we don't walk around announcing our net worth and our income and our spending habits to everyone around us. I mean, so I think it is wise to come in with separation of those two things. Whether you want to come in anonymous or pseudo-anonymous, like that's kind of up to you. I will say, like, in a space that is ridden with scams and, you know, BS, like I think it means a lot when somebody's willing to put their face on something. You know, that's really, really, really powerful. But I would say similarly, I have a pseudonym. I've been operating under it since 2017. That pseudonym, like, has value to it. I mean, it there are strings attached with that identity. It's valuable and precious to me, almost as valuable as my IRL identity is to me. And so just as I go through life thinking about, is this something I want to stand on, you know, as my human person in the meat space, I do the same thing in the digital space. I don't want to ever soil Valko's reputation because that's something I'm proud of. And at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, and our actions are now all immutably carved into stone.
Your reputation is out there, and you can follow the crumbs.
Right. The amplification of reputation equity on the blockchain is huge.
Massive. I like that you use reputation equity there. 100%. I definitely toyed with that. Either being anonymous or being doxxed on my X profile and just in my social behavior, honestly, and chose to just be doxxed. But I think there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, look,
building another brand.
I doxed that weekend I met you in Charleston. I chose to post a picture after that weekend because after the weekend, I found out that like 3 or 4 other amazing people that I've been friends with on the internet for years were there, and they didn't know what I looked like. And I was upset about that, not because I was chasing like vanity or fame, but I kind of had this realization like, oh, my face is actually just like the best name tag.
Yeah, there's definitely equity that you're building online. And so how do you balance that? On one hand, you're spending all of this time building reputation through an anonymous identity, Valko, and then you have your real life IRL identity as well. So how did you manage that at the time? Were you planning to bridge your IRL identity and online identity, or how did you go about that?
It was hard. Like in many ways for that period of time, I was like not doxxed. I spent most of my energy and effort building my online reputation. And for a long time, my IRL self had kind of just been put on the back burner. There's these rare instances where I was interviewing for a job or trying to get a client under my real name. And I could be like, hey, like that's me online. Like I'm Valko. And that would boost my IRL identity. There were rarely instances in the reverse. But when I did doxed, I realized there was a lot of value to Valko being like, hey, I'm this guy. Like, look at all the things I've done in the real world. There's this like 1+1=3 effect there. And so I wouldn't change it for the world. I think there are definitely like real security risks that are greater than if you were simply like, you had a high net worth in the regular world. Like I think having a high net worth in the crypto world is more dangerous because, people can verifiably see that you have that net worth. So they have more
Yeah.
conviction to attack you. But also it's just like, it's actually a stealable thing. And once it's stolen, it's irreversible, right? So
Right, right.
it's quite literally like having a bunch of cash under your mattress. So I think the security concerns are real. And that's something people need to, take very seriously and make sure that they're custodying their stuff, the right way. If you haven't read the TAP 3 address protocol, TAP thread from 6529, I definitely encourage you to do so because I think that's the best place to start for, setting up proper wallet architecture or, your custody structure.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I'll post a link to that 6529 thread in the episode description. But just to rewind a bit, can you describe when you first discovered crypto and why you're paying so much attention to this and continue to do so? As we mentioned before, everyone remembers their first transaction. And when was it that you first discovered Bitcoin and crypto?
Yeah. So in high school, I was definitely a bit of a misfit. I grew up playing violin since I was 3. I was the school orc dork, I was concert master of the school orchestra, but also captain of the wrestling team. So it's a weird combo identity. But at the end of the day, like I was a gamer. I had my buddies. We spent a lot of time on Reddit, a lot of time on 4chan, a lot of time playing Minecraft. So we were like computer guys. And in 2011, we kind of heard about this Bitcoin stuff and that you could buy things online on the dark web, which like as a high school boy, nothing sounds cooler than the dark web. They're like, it's the 99.9% of the internet that you don't see, that Google doesn't surface. And it's like, oh shit,
Right.
got to check that out. So honestly, in 2011, me and some buddies pulled together a couple of $100 and we bought Bitcoin. We started mining Bitcoin and we purchased some like, let's just call it stuff on the Silk Road. And that was my first introduction to crypto. And I think that's a pretty common story. And it's funny because it in a lot of ways corroborates this like outsider perspective of shadowy super coders and nefarious, illegal
Yeah.
activities. But, really it was just like, oh, cool. Like this is internet money that nobody controls. But I wouldn't say in 2011, I was like, oh my God, this is the future. But what I will say is when you buy something at $2.50 as a high schooler, and then you go through college and you just see it keep going up and to the right, and you have the intelligence to like zoom out 6 months, zoom out 1 year, zoom out 3 years, and not get caught up in the day-to-day fluctuations of the price of this thing, the trend becomes pretty clear. So while my introduction to Bitcoin was in high school, it was when I really started earning money in college that I started investing. And then I was studying music business at Berklee College of Music as well as sound design. And I just thought there was so much potential for the creator economy and these outdated, like arbitrary or seemingly arbitrary music licensing frameworks and blockchain. Like you could kind of see it right there. And I had one professor at Berkeley, George Howard. He's a lawyer. He teaches music business at Berkeley. Really brilliant guy, very forward thinking, and he very much encouraged me to like actually explore blockchain. So I think that was kind of like my one nudge from someone older and wiser than me that actually wasn't like, oh no, that stay away from that Bitcoin stuff. He was like, yeah, like this is the future, and it's definitely the future of music and technology. So like get in there. So that was kind of really what convinced me to kind of explore what else blockchain had to offer. And I would say my very first transaction on chain myself was so I was like a Bitcoin maxi kind of around this point in my life. I was curious about what blockchain had to offer beyond Bitcoin, but I was skeptical. And I saw this headline that said, CryptoKitties breaks the Ethereum blockchain. I thought that was pretty hilarious. This is like 2017, right? I thought it was funny. Ethereum's down. I'm like, oh, the shitcoin broke. Ha ha ha. But, cats are pretty funny. You can breed these cats. You can pimp them out. I mean, you could literally have people pay you to breed with your, superior genetics cat or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool. Like maybe I'll get some cats. So it was December 5th, 2017. Check the chain. I moved some funds off Coinbase. I got 2 CryptoKitties. And 2 hours later, I got 2 CryptoPunks. And, that was the beginning of like actually living on chain. That was like the dawn of my crypto native life, I guess.
And you mentioned the intelligence you had in high school, not to get caught up in all the noise at that time. I mean, that's such a young age to actually understand that you should just, stick to your plan and not sell and not get caught up. Like it's kind of unfathomable, like to be that young and to understand, these core principles.
Yeah, I mean, it's all it really took for me was like I knew gambling was like a losing game, right? The house always wins. And I think most people, even people who like to gamble, know that that's the reality. And so knowing that kind of context and then seeing some of the numbers on like how many hedge funds over a 10, 20 or 30 year period actually outperformed the S&P 500, it was just the same thing. It was obvious to me that like the moment you try to time the market, you're kind of just like fooling yourself and it's a loser's game, except for like the very rare few who are able to actually consistently beat the market. And that really is such a small percentage of people. You have to have like real alpha, like access to special information or speed of information acquisition or maybe speed of execution. Other than that, like, I feel like the moment you're trying to time the market, you're just you're a gambler LARPing as an investor. And look, I think if you zoom out on all scales, you're arguably timing the market. Even if you're a 5-year investor, right? You're still timing something. But for me, like it's just buy, dollar cost average, hold, and only sell for 2 reasons. One is you want to support yourself or your loved ones, buy your mom a house or a car, or maybe you have some unforeseen medical expense. I don't know. So I think that, support yourself or your loved ones. And the second one is that after you take the tax hit, there's a better investment. And for me, there's not a better investment than Bitcoin. So, why am I working so hard to make all this money to buy this Bitcoin just to sell it a year later? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not selling it for anything anytime soon.
Education is massive. The space moves extremely fast. I mean, just looking back, about 8 years ago or so, when I first got introduced to the concept, and I felt like everything I would read today is old next week. And there's such a momentum, and sometimes keeping up with it is, it's a full-time job. I come home, you're reading, you're trying to catch up with everything that's happening on the timeline. You're reading the headlines, which may or may not be the best thing to do, especially if you're trying to, stick to your investment philosophies. So how do you stay up to date? I know that you do have a newsletter now, which is incredible. The consistency I've seen with what you've been putting out has been really inspiring. So how do you stay up to date with everything and get such a detailed newsletter out every single day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work. It's about 2 hours a day. Monday through Friday, publish
Yeah.
at 10 a.m. I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, before I talk about the newsletter, I think, to your point, like, um, if you want to be the best in any field, like, I don't care what you do. You could be an athlete, a musician, or a
Yeah.
trader, investor. Like, you need to have an amazing information diet. And I think everybody knows this, but in practice, it's actually super hard to keep a good information diet because, like, one, like, social media is just like straight up addicting. I mean, you start to crave it. And
Yeah.
once you're in it, you just start doom scrolling. And it's hard to be thoughtful and have a plan when that's just like such an easy trap to fall into. And then I'd say, second of all, people are doing just like increasingly ridiculous stuff on the internet. Like, there was some meme coin dev who lit himself on fire, as part of a stunt to pump his bags. I mean, and there's so many infinite, just ridiculous things that people are doing to get attention that it's actually like almost degrading our collective intelligence as a hive mind. There's this concept in game theory called it's like Molochs, and the idea is that there might be something you can do that's like very advantageous over your competitors in a game or an environment. But if everybody starts doing that thing, it's like a net negative outcome for everybody. So, like, the example I like to give is like at a concert, if you stand up, great, you have the best view in the house. But then when everyone's standing up, it's like, okay, like,
Yeah.
that's a net negative outcome, unless everybody likes to stand and dance, of course. But, I think we're seeing something like that happen right now on social media with people, doing whatever they can to fight for attention. So I would say, like, information diet is key. It is very difficult. I think, if you double click on crypto is like especially challenged because it is like a new space. There's just such a high volume of information because there's all these new discoveries and advancements and players and companies and fundraising rounds happening every day. And it stretches the gambit. It's not just like finance anymore. It's everything from like, culture and art all the way to like the most technical, like, new iterations of a automated money maker algorithm, So there's just so much information there. And then it's so ridden with just noise, right? There's all this scam. So sifting through the noise in this space is like super key. And that's really why I created my newsletter. Is like, all of us crypto natives are busy trying to do impactful things. I mean, not everyone, of course, but people I like to hang out with are building and they're busy, but they also need this good information diet. So my goal with Specs is to basically, I read the news for probably more than, I write the newsletter for 2 hours a day. I probably read the news for 4 hours a day so that everybody else doesn't have to, so that they can read it in 3 minutes and get sort of like, okay, what are the top 3 stories of the day? Why do they matter? And also, like, what's Valko's opinion? Like, I'm not trying to be just like, holier than thou and objective all the time. Like, I have opinions, I have biases, and I think putting those out in the open, whether I'm right or wrong, maybe I change my mind later, I think it's super important because I think the real alpha is not my own take and my individual understanding, but it's actually like when you get to talk about it with somebody else and, you collectively kind of get to pinpoint the truth and find the path forward. And that's why I love having, my newsletter, but also all these Telegram chats. The CryptoPunks Telegram chat is amazing. My newsletter has a Telegram chat as well.
Yeah.
And I just encourage people to get in there and like share their ideas, even if they're half formed or the headline is still breaking, because, we're humans, we make mistakes, but I think we'll get to the truth and like, the quote unquote right answer faster if we just like are a little bit fearless and talk about things and are also equipped to handle misinformation and change our minds. Because, I think you have to be curious and you have to seek the truth and you have to be opinionated, but you also have to be open-minded and willing to change your mind. Otherwise, the echo chamber devolves into like something, potentially dangerous.
Yep. And you can definitely develop some serious confirmation bias out there as well. But on the topic of headlines and the political side of crypto and Bitcoin, it's hard to ignore, especially through the presidential election and now the current presidency, that the topic has increasingly become a partisan issue. So what are your thoughts in terms of one party being in power over another and how that affects the crypto landscape?
I mean, look, I'm of the mind like this technology is like I said, it's like permissionless, it's open, it's meant for everyone. So um, I think like picking sides is a slippery slope, and I try to get away from that. But at the same time, like we live in a bipartisan system, and you're either voting for red or you're voting for blue, right? And I'd say it's pretty clear that like one party is very pro crypto. It's in the party platform, and the other party has waged a war on crypto for the last 4 years. But like anything, like a whole group of people's opinions doesn't necessarily represent an individual within that system's opinions. So there's tons of Democrats who are pro crypto. They voted in favor of SAB 121, which was that bill that Biden eventually vetoed. And so there's tons of people in the Democrat Party who are pro crypto, and obviously a lot in the Republican Party as well. Of course, like talk is cheap. Trump many years ago was outspokenly anti-crypto. And of course, like Biden-Harris admin has done some actual like anti-crypto things. But I do think it's like pretty clear that like if there is a party that at least has put forward pro-crypto policies to date, it is the Republican Party. And if you want to get into this like idea of, well, is talk cheap? Actions speak louder than words. Like you can look at the SAB 121 vote and see like, of the 210 some odd people that voted in favor of it, like 80 of them are Democrats. The rest are Republicans. So like in my mind, like crypto will become a nonpartisan issue. And I hope that happens sooner rather than later. Right now, it's not quite there yet. And I'd like to be a part of making it a nonpartisan issue. Crypto has survived far worse. We survived the early days, 2009, 2010, 2011. We survived Mount Gox. Like, I mean, things are just so different now than they've ever been. There's so much wind in our sails now that what I am more fearful of is like, I guess the US position as a leader in the space. And I really hope that we don't push innovation and talent outside of this country to other ones, because, I live here and I like living in the crypto capital of the free world. But, we'll see. I hope it stays that way. But I think crypto is going to be fine either way. And anything that happens in 2, 3, 4 years, like, I'm here for 30, 40, 50 years, so I don't really care.
Right, exactly. Thinking about governments adopting crypto, there's already been some countries that have been very outspoken. The leadership has been extremely supportive with the adoption of crypto for their governments and the usage of Bitcoin in particular. How do you see this playing out? Do you think there's pros and cons for this? Do you think this is a very positive highlight for crypto?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, some would object saying, and I've had this conversation a few times in the Specs Telegram chat, some people are like, oh, whales coming in, like governments and Wall Street, with the ETFs and all that, and accumulating all this Bitcoin is like, it's bad for decentralization. And I'd say like, sure, like concentration of like wealth with single entities is not in the spirit of decentralization, but also it's like, it's the world we live in. Like this is the power law distribution of wealth. I don't think Bitcoin's not here to solve that. Like the key difference between today and before Bitcoin is that the rails, the infrastructure is now owned and operated by the people, not by Wall Street and the government. And there's a very clear separation of like money and state, as it were. And I think that's the fundamental shift. Of course, if the government gets a vast majority of mining power over Bitcoin, then we have a problem. But I think, that's yet to be seen. I think this idea of like governments adopting crypto as a strategic reserve asset makes tons of sense. It's also like conveniently very bullish for my bags, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, right now they hold gold, right? How long until humans are able to atomically create gold, right? And then there's just infinite supply of gold that's indistinguishable from like organically occurring gold and synthesized gold, right? I think that future is probably not that far away. I mean, I'm not a material scientist. Maybe I'm getting all woo-woo here, but like, I think like if gold is the gold standard right now for holding money in a strategic reserve along with some other foreign currencies and stuff, I think it's perfectly suitable for Bitcoin to be in that position because it's just more robust and it's more future proof. And, I think the fact that we're seeing pension funds who historically have some of the longest investment horizons and lowest
Yeah.
risk tolerances of any investment entities on planet Earth. I think the fact that we're seeing pension funds buy Bitcoin is the signal that everybody else needs to understand and respect like that Bitcoin is legit. Because 5 years ago, if you had told me pension funds would be buying Bitcoin, I would have told you you're crazy. So I think it's totally reasonable that governments will start buying it and not just these kind of like smaller governments, like big ones. And then once that starts, I think
Yes,
it's
yes.
like game theory takes effect and like, then the great Bitcoin race is on.
Do you think that that will cause crypto to become even more politicized, though? You talk about a race, with different governments globally trying to accumulate as much as possible. There's obviously political games that could, get introduced here.
Yeah, no, I mean it's hard to even model that in my head. I mean it definitely sounds like an arms race of sorts or something, or it
Right.
got like
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
like Cold War vibes. But I think it makes sense. I mean, it's fundamentally it's like a good hedge against like an infinitely increasing supply of insert national currency. And so I think it's actually a great way for any individual government to like curb their inflation rates and have something hard to back their currency. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what'll happen. But
Yeah.
I'm here for it, and I'm optimistic. I think humans always win in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. And all of this is really making me think, like, if I'm listening to this and I'm contemplating getting involved, am I too late? I mean, you mentioned earlier that you started mining and or buying Bitcoin at, I don't know, what was it, like $2.60 or whatever it was. And now it's circulating between 80 and $90,000. And it's probably going to run higher. Am I too late to get in now? And what can people do to not get left behind?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's too late. I think we're still pretty early. I think if you're coming in with this mindset of like, I want to double my money in a year, or I want to
Yeah.
get rich quick, like you already have the wrong approach. I think first and foremost, you have to come in with a long-term mindset. And when I say long-term, I'm talking like 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
Mm.
And from that angle, I don't think it's too early at all. I think everybody should say, this is the percentage of my portfolio I would like to allocate to crypto. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%. I think the younger you are, the larger that percent should be. For me, it's
Maybe you're
100%.
all in.
Maybe you're all
Right.
in. And once you figure that out, I would say just start dollar cost averaging. Figure out a way to programmatically buy your Bitcoin. You can do it through Coinbase, Robinhood, Cash App. Forget about the self custody stuff for now. I think that's like I think that's the goal, and everybody should get there. But I'm not so foolish to think that everybody's going to be willing to self custody a shit ton of money overnight. It takes time to get comfortable, and you have to dip your toe in the water, right? So I think people just have to figure out what percentage of their portfolio they want allocated to crypto, then find a way to dollar cost average into crypto. And if you're not sure what to buy in crypto, I'd say don't overcomplicate it. Just buy Bitcoin, or maybe split Bitcoin and Ethereum, 50-50 or 60-40. I mean, I think those are the safe bets. Anything beyond that, I would warn people against because, we've seen so many cryptos come and go over the years. Some enter the top 10 and leave within a year, right? And, if you're trying to time the market on scales like that, you're probably going to lose. And just go, look at charts of like dollar cost averaging versus even
Yeah. Sorry.
perfectly.
What is that? Just for those who are listening, like, please explain dollar cost averaging.
Yeah, the idea of a dollar cost average is this idea that, I didn't just buy Bitcoin at $1 or at $10. It's like I bought it at $1 and $3 and $10 and all these various entry prices because I'm buying every week or every day or every month, whatever. And over time, you have this average cost basis for what you bought your Bitcoin at. So the concept fundamentally is like you are just programmatically buying Bitcoin and you don't care if the market is the greenest it's ever been or the bloodiest it's ever been. It literally just doesn't matter. And the peace of mind is incredible. And if you look at the numbers, it's like vastly superior unless you can actually time the dip perfectly every single time. which nobody can do, then dollar cost averaging is superior. Because like at this point, I think, a lot of people will say like the risk of not participating in Bitcoin is far greater than the risk of participating. And I think
Yeah.
if you like kind of look at that at a more micro scale, if you're trying to have dry powder or money left aside to buy the dip, there's a risk that the train leaves the station and you're not on it because Bitcoin
Right.
historically makes these big jumps in very short periods of time. And you're
Tens
going to
of
feel like,
thousands of dollars.
yeah, you're going to feel like an idiot if you were trying to have some money on the side and then like, boom, Bitcoin goes from 60K to 120K in 5 days. And you were
Right.
just waiting for it to come back down. But it's like, oh, like see you next cycle, basically. So I think you just have to always be in the market, and dollar cost average your position. That's what I do. I buy Bitcoin every 2 weeks. I have
Yeah.
direct deposit from my like income and salary going straight into Coinbase, and then I dollar cost average from there, and don't have to pay any fees, and I don't have to think about it, and it's great.
So you would say Coinbase is a great place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Unless you're like
Yeah.
already all in on Cash App or Robinhood, and you can look into those,
Yeah.
but I would say just like look into fees because sometimes they can be like 2 to 3%, which isn't going to matter in
Mhm.
10, 15 years, but I don't know, 2 to 3% feels bad too. Generally, you can pay some premium service like to not pay fees, or you can direct deposit your paycheck into those accounts, and you'll skirt fees that way too.
And then in terms of risk management, like investing in crypto is risky, right? I mean, with the big swings, like you said, you could go from 60,000 to 120K in like 5 days. We've seen in the past like huge moves like that. It also goes in the other direction as well. So again, for someone who's just dipping their feet into this right now, do you have any advice with risk management and creating somewhat of a balanced portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you look at Bitcoin's risk adjusted returns, like if we're going to define risk as volatility, which is how it's defined in a lot of these risk metrics, like Sharpe ratio, Bitcoin's one of the greatest assets, if not the greatest assets of all time, even when you factor in the risks. So that's all I kind of need to hear to be like, all right, I'm all in on Bitcoin. Of course, if I diversified my portfolio, it would be less risky because I'd be less exposed to a single asset. But I'm kind of the mind that like nobody got rich by diversifying. Like anybody who ever made generational wealth concentrated either their time, career efforts, or money into like one thing, building a business
Mm.
generally. It could be anything though, right? So I'm in that like wealth generating portion of my life. I'm 30 years old, so I'm a little bit more risk on. But like when you look at Bitcoin in isolation, forget your overall portfolio theory. Um, the risk adjusted returns are king. So I'd say like you shouldn't be afraid to go to some degree in on Bitcoin. And then I'd say, be prepared for 80% drawdowns. That's like typical from all time highs. And you have to just be at peace with that and know that you're still dollar cost averaging. Don't like, you know, go all in one buy and then see the 80% drawdown and feel like an idiot. So I'd say don't do that, dollar cost average. And then I'd say just like learn to be a little monk at the top of the hill at your monastery.
Yeah.
Just be at peace, be chill. Like it takes going
Yeah.
through one cycle to really, I think, understand that. But you can kind of tell who's been through several cycles and who isn't because you
Yeah.
start to increasingly just like not care about the day to day or month to month movements because in 10 years like everybody's going to be a winner. So, oh, and I would say the other thing in terms of risk management is like I would just highly discourage people from any sort of leverage because that's how you get overextended and
Yeah.
those 80% downturns or even less can cause you to basically sell the dip, which as we know, is
Right.
not what you're supposed to do.
Would be forced to sell.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember my first, as we say, crypto winter. Extremely brutal. I think it was around, 2018? Getting in 2017 and 2018, you're just seeing everything completely tank. But it does build resilience, like you said. And, you mentioned meme coins. Somebody, again, starting to learn, starting to see headlines going on crypto Twitter, seeing a lot of people talking about meme coins. What is a meme coin? And I think you mentioned you don't get involved in meme coins. Why? And what's going on here with all the meme coins?
Yeah, I mean, I think meme coins are really cool. They're certainly fun and they capture culture. I mean, one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies of all time by market cap is Dogecoin, which is a meme coin. It happens to be a meme coin where they actually, I believe, fractionalized the meme itself. So they got the NFT of the original meme and then they issued the token against it. I think it's Doge, not sheep, but it's one of the dog memes. I'm almost certain it's Doge. And it's a top 10 cryptocurrency. I mean, it's larger than Tron. It's larger than Cardano, and that's pretty insane. So meme coins are clearly something to be respected. Meme coins have clearly captured the attention of the space. But if the goal is to make money, you should be very cautious involving yourself with meme coins, because if you look at the numbers, a very small amount of people actually win with meme coins. It's a zero-sum game, right? For every winner, there's a loser. And there happens to be very few winners and a lot of losers. But if the goal is not how do I make money, and I'm not talking about how do I maybe have a chance at 1,000x, that's different. How do you build wealth? Then meme coins are not the answer, in my opinion. I'm open to be challenged there, but if the goal is to have fun, plug in with a community, create culture or ride a cultural wave, I mean, I think meme coins are amazing. I think they may present some new novel methods to fundraise, for example. I mean, I think we've seen other meme coins going to fund different causes, or Vitalik took a bunch of his meme coin proceedings from all the animal meme coins recently, and he donated $500K to animal shelters. So I think there's an interesting way to basically take a meme, an idea, a viral thought, and kind of it's almost like a transducer. Meme coins are this weird transducer of the attention economy and the actual economy, right? A microphone takes mechanical pressure waves and converts it into electrical signal to record sound. The speaker does the opposite, electrical signal into physical pressure waves so that we can hear things. That's a transducer. It converts energy, right? I almost think of meme coins as this interesting transducer of taking the attention economy and literally just turning it into money. And then, if that meme is powerful enough and can gather enough attention, then it's just a matter of how is this treasury or funds potentially deployed to maybe do good or do something. And NFTs were just almost like meme coins with JPEGs. It's a family of unique memes or something. Crypto Dick Butts is a hilarious NFT collection I'm a part of. And we took our treasury this past NFT NYC, and we bought out the Islanders hockey arena, the whole thing, and threw a rave from 10 p.m. till 4 a.m. We had a whole weird ritual with a high priestess and an actual inflatable dick butt skating on ice. I mean, we played hockey. I think 2 people broke their collarbones. It was just a wild night. I mean, looking at the staff in this arena, looking around at these weird tech bros dressed in all black, doing column response, chants. I mean, it was bizarre, but point being, I think meme coins are an interesting new way to monetize on the internet. And I'm bullish on all new ways to monetize on the internet, whether that's for creators or large groups of people, because until recently, the only real way to 99% of the money made on the internet is just advertising, which is lame.
Yeah,
it's tied to surveillance, and it's very top down. Meme coins are very bottoms up, which is cool.
Yeah, and a lot of the success is tied into the fact that they have the ability to, permeate culture. So looking into the future, imagining this wonderful world where there's all of this widespread crypto adoption, What do you think the social and economic impact of this could be globally?
Mm-hmm. Again, I think it's so hard to model. It's such a complex and
Mm,
large universe we live in. But I'd say two things that get me pretty excited when I think about blockchain ubiquity is one, it levels the playing field for every human on planet Earth. Like right now, there are people born in nations that, I mean, heck, they can't even access an uncensored internet, right? Maybe
yeah, sure.
Starlink is going to change that for them. Um, Maybe Starlink will deny services to those people in those countries because they don't want to mess with those big governments, right? It's hard to say,
Yeah.
but what crypto does is it levels the playing field, and now everybody in the world, no matter where they are born and raised, can plug into a global economy. And that is really, 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 really powerful. I think it's hard for um, people born in like America to really understand because we live in, you know, what's supposed to be like the bastion of freedom around the world. But if
Yeah,
you
you
think
have
about all these
access.
other countries, like it's that leveling of the playing field is very powerful and I think is a net good. It's probably going to shake some things up too, right? There's going to be tons of countries that are going to say, no, you can't use crypto. Crypto is banned. And people are going
Yeah.
to use it anyways. You know, we saw how prohibition played out in the US. Like they tried to ban alcohol, the effort
Hmm.
was futile. And I think you'll see the same thing happen with crypto. It's probably going to lead to tension, but I think, you know, ultimately, like it's a force that cannot be stopped. So I think that's really cool. The other thing that I think is pretty cool is just like you think about the like global liquidity that is unlocked by having one giant shared backend that is the blockchain or variety of blockchains. And that's pretty powerful too. I mean, we literally live in a world right now where the largest like stock exchanges, like New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, all that, shut down. They don't operate on weekends. They like close at 4 p.m. and open
Yeah.
up at 9 a.m. That's ridiculous. So just having a global economy that not just operates 24/7, 365, no matter if Silicon Valley Bank goes down or, you know, there's a big 30% crash in the market and
Circuit
suddenly all
breakers.
the brokerages
Yeah.
shut down mysteriously.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Like just having that 24/7, 365 thing is cool, but then having that kind of weave together every country and every human on planet Earth is really powerful. So creating a truly global economy gets me really excited. And I'm kind of the mind that like TradFi service providers and institutions will eventually just become like liaisons or front ends or portals to the blockchain. They'll become that like friendly guy down the lane that you go talk
Yeah.
to so that you can actually plug in to the global economy. But the global economy is not going to be this weird variety of like Swift networks and, you know, ACH transfers and the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. That it will be one shared great backend that everybody can permissionally access and build on top of and use and plug into. And that's really cool. And those local service providers will be a way to help you do that in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Maybe it's compliant with local regulations. Maybe they custody stuff for you because you're too afraid to custody stuff, which is reasonable. I think most people aren't responsible enough to self custody, just like most people are probably not responsible enough to like own a gun in their house, right? Like with great power
Mm.
comes great responsibility. But yeah, it's this idea of one great shared financial backend that doesn't go down that gets me really excited and that levels the playing field for every single person on planet Earth. You know, and the effects of that are just profound.
How do you feel like this could affect traditional investing? Investing in the Nasdaq, in the S&P, in traditional investing in companies, stocks. Thinking about it evolving into being widespread, and as you speak to the 24/7 nature of the market and having that very solid back end, do you think this is going to have a huge effect on traditional investment thesis?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a financial standpoint and return standpoint, like there's no denying Bitcoin has outperformed the S&P 500. I think over time that gap will just like naturally close as
Mm.
upsides removed from Bitcoin over time and there are more participants, the returns will eventually settle down And simultaneously, you're going to have a bunch of companies like MicroStrategy, which I don't think is in the S&P 500, but you're just going to have all these companies that are either about to be or are in the S&P 500 holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet to some degree. And that's going to, on the other end, kind of close the gap from a return standpoint. So I think that's like one way that I think eventually it all settles out. And in the meantime, it's just a matter of like how much are you exposed percentage wise to one versus the other. And like as time goes along, maybe you taper away from Bitcoin and back to the S&P. Like maybe that's what I do. But for now, I'm 100% Bitcoin. I'd say the other lens through which I think about it is like, to what degree does this change, like just reporting requirements over time and reporting expectations? Like right now, when companies have their quarterly earnings, it's like, it's a big deal, right? It's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
huge deal. And like people study that stuff and make entire livings off trading those brief moments in time. But what
Right.
happens when we transition to a world where anybody can in real time validate a company's financials because they're on the blockchain, or perhaps some of their accounts are on the blockchain? Like MicroStrategy is the third largest holder of Bitcoin in the world. It's like Satoshi, or maybe they're number two. It's like Satoshi, MicroStrategy, BlackRock. I don't know. They're up there, right? And we can all see
Mm.
their holdings at any point in time. And indirectly, we can kind of get a good assessment for like the health of the company, right? So I think
Yeah.
over time, like we're going to move into more of like a world of like fluid information and not these like quarterly, you know, hard events that like cause waves unnecessarily.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin's place or crypto's place in exponential technologies, right? I mean, there's a lot going on right now, right? We have AI, we've got nanotechnology, we've got robotics, we've obviously got, crypto and blockchain. Maybe it's hard again to model this, but how do you see crypto's place in all of this playing out?
I mean, it's certainly probably the biggest technological advancement of our time, along with AI.
Yeah.
To me, I
Yeah.
think I view Bitcoin as like very freedom enabling of a technology. It restores power
Yeah.
to the people, and takes power away from the incumbents, right? The governments, the
Yeah.
banks, and Wall Street. Um, AI is different. AI, for me, it lets me make thumbnails every day for my newsletter. It takes what was like a small amount of creative capacity and skill and like
Yeah.
unleashes it. But like what that really
Yeah.
is like a productivity gain, right? So I
Sure.
think like AI to me is like a way to like boost mankind's overall productivity and free up time to do other things. Perhaps it's more creative tasks. I don't really know, but
Yeah.
it's going to increase our output, in terms of our productivity and like the goods and services and stuff we can create. And so I think those two are obviously like the big pillars of our time.
Yeah.
How they play off each other, I don't know. Some people call them opposite sides of the same coin. Peter Thiel said if Bitcoin's a democratic technology, then AI is a communistic technology. And the point he's trying to make there is like one's very bottoms up, whereas the other one's very top down, big data sets, centralized compute,
Hmm.
open AI kind of like runs the AI world right now, right?
Yeah.
The name is open AI, but like how open is it versus like the Bitcoin source code? Like I don't really know. I'm
Right.
non-technical, but yeah, how they play off each other, I think is going to be interesting. Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, was talking about like how we can enable AIs to have their own wallets that they can control, and then you have these AI agents like doing things, which is in some ways maybe scary, but in other ways it's like it's very exciting. You could actually like sometimes you're talking to ChatGPT and you want it to go like execute something and go do something, but it can't
Mm.
actually like do it. But imagine if it had like a bank account and you're like, oh, go get me a flight, go do this for me, right? It's like I get really excited about that overlap too, because it's like now you're giving them, it's almost like you're giving them arms to now reach out and grab the financial world, or our future great financial back end.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. I mean, even microtransactions, right? I mean, the flight's a great example, but even, you want your electronic vehicle to go and park itself and pay 25 cents in the meter, right? I mean, it makes sense for all of this to actually integrate at some point.
Yeah, like peer to peer, like
Yeah.
Um, transactions with
Agent to
energy
agent.
is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much there. It's certainly like I think there's a lot to be afraid of with technology, but
Hmm.
I choose to just have the mindset of like this is the best time to be alive. You know, technology has created so many benefits from like longevity to just like creative outlets and information consumption. Like to
Oh
me,
yeah.
like I have like the technology is abundant mindset, but I certainly get scared when I think about AI making the kill shot or something with the drone and stuff like that. You know, like there's definitely a lot of ways this can go wrong. Um, so I'm happy we have smart people working on those things.
A lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can't have this conversation without talking about CryptoPunks.
Oh yeah.
That's how we met. Um, what do punks really represent to you? And I know you mentioned earlier on that I think you bought a couple of CryptoPunks really early on. What do they represent to you personally?
Yeah. I mean, so much. I'd say early on, it was this idea of like a new medium, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like Bitcoin introduced digital ownership, NFTs unleashed it. You know, I think the most precious items in life are unique. Might be a unique
Yeah.
memory. It might be family heirloom. It's not your Mercedes C300 that's identical to your neighbor's, right? It's the
Yes.
most precious things in life are these unique things. So CryptoPunks kind of debuted this idea to me of owning unique digital assets. And while they weren't the first NFT, which is like widely understood, they were one of the very first NFTs, and they predate the ERC 721 standard itself. And if you look at that standard and you read through it, it was inspired by CryptoPunks. Um, so CryptoPunks was really the catalyst that kind of like introduced digital ownership of unique items to the world. And like I said earlier, digital ownership in an increasingly digital world is kind of a big deal. In many
Yes.
ways, it's the bedrock of the metaverse, right? Like, I mean, empires and governments have been created to defend property rights, right? Like NFTs were the beginning of property rights in the metaverse, whether
Yeah.
that's owning a digital parcel of land, owning your PFP, or perhaps
Hmm.
owning a very unique financial position or loan. I mean, it could really be anything.
Piece of art.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so punks to me were like, it was like owning a piece of history. It's like owning one of the first, oils on canvas. It's not just about the artist here and the creators, which I mean, Matt and John are legends. And CryptoPunks as an artwork is iconic. I got the
Yeah.
CryptoPunks after the CryptoKitties because I thought the CryptoPunks looked cool. And I
Yeah.
naturally even like went into MS Paint, modified mine a bit, and then
Hmm.
set it as my Twitter background and my Discord background. Like I didn't really know it
Yeah.
was meant to be a PFP or any of that, but kind of intuitively did that because I like the art. But I guess what I'm saying is like it's about so much more than the art. They created a new medium, and I don't think that's like discussed enough. Um, it led to now what is like the hardest form of provenance mankind has ever had. And so to me, it was originally that it was like, oh my god, I think this is cool. Over time, you start to really understand the historical importance and how it invented a new medium. And then you also start to think about like, okay, what does that translate to in terms of my bag, right? So initially, it was kind of a blend of that, like, oh, this is cool, new medium, great for my bags. So I believe in a greater tomorrow in terms of like this thing that's the dollar is probably going to be worth more. I never really expected it to like pop off fully in the way it did. Obviously, I would have just like bought way more if that was the case. But I always believed,
As we would, as everything, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I always believed in it enough to not sell when when $100 became $1,000, $1,000 became $10,000, and $10,000 became $100,000, right? Like every day was a decision to stay. But I would say my conviction in punks shifted tremendously over time from something that was more, like I said, historically based and financial based, and the art is cool based to like now it's all about identity and community.
Yeah.
Punks have taught me, I'd say like 80% of what I know about crypto, I've learned from CryptoPunks. All of my special memories, traveling the world, going to these events have largely been because of CryptoPunks. You know, I room with CryptoPunks. I throw events with CryptoPunks. I get VIP access to other events because, you know, we really treat each other like a family. And so it's just funny to me. Like, I wouldn't say um, my initial belief and conviction is gone. It is just like completely overridden by this tremendous sense of family and community that, you know, is far more valuable to me than anything else. I mean, at this point, like I could never sell my main punk. It is
No, same.
me, and that's scary, right? Anthony Pompliano's wife said something once. She wrote a book. I forget what it's called, Hidden Genius, or but in the book she says, when you tie your identity to an asset, you're setting yourself up for psychological disaster. And I think that is so true. And we've seen it. Friends who clicked a bad phishing link, Crypto Novo like infamously lost his punk, and then all the
Yes.
punks pulled money together to
Everyone
help him
rallied
get
to
it
get it
back. And like
back.
we can't
Yeah,
do
yeah,
that for everybody who misclicks, but Novo is like one of the leaders in our community, and we all love him. He goes around dressed as his punk, clown nose, knitted hat,
yeah.
glasses, everything. And so
Embodies his punk.
and everybody was
Yeah,
trying to just like everybody sympathized with him. They're like, holy crap, like, you know, it's like it's really like being stripped of your last name, or back in the
mm,
days when they would like cut like a warrior's, like a samurai's long hair to shame him. Like losing your punk
yeah,
is like that. So um yeah, it's exciting, but it's also a little scary.
yeah. I completely agree with you. I mean, I've only had my punk for almost 2 years, and I'm already completely tied into the identity and what it means to me. And it does mean so much. I mean, way beyond using my punk on my socials, I've met so many great people from many different backgrounds. I mean, from all the way back in Charleston to LA, and the opportunity of international meetups. It is so valuable.
It's such a cool group of like people who I think really care about the space. You got a mix
Yeah.
of OGs,
Yeah.
and then you got a mix of newcomers who, like, you know, they made their mark on planet Earth in one way or another. They got their punk, they joined the
Yeah.
community, and I mean, it's really the best. Number one club on the internet for sure.
Yeah. 100%. And so there is a question that I ask everybody on this series, and it varies a little bit from person to person. But for you, what would you say it means to be a leader in this space? I mean, there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, you're putting work out every single day. You're taking a leadership role in terms of educating and providing information. What does that mean to you overall?
Yeah, I think for a long time I cared a lot about how can I increase awareness of Bitcoin,
Yeah.
but or crypto, and I feel like that part of the battle's over. Now I think the battleground is how do you help people understand it and then ultimately adopt it, right? So it's like starts with awareness, then understanding, then adoption, right? It's almost like a typical top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel marketing funnel. And I feel like we're beyond the top of funnel part. Everybody knows about crypto and Bitcoin now, but not everybody understands it, and not everybody is adopting it. So I've historically tried to operate in that. How do I help people understand, and how do I help people adopt?
Yeah.
Which obviously like is kind of an outward facing thing most of the time. You're talking to quote unquote normies or non crypto natives and trying to sell them the
Yeah.
gospel. And for a long time, that's where I viewed my responsibility in this space.
Mm.
But the content I like to consume is written for people like me, crypto natives. Like I love reading 6529s, really long and intellectual, lengthy threads. I love reading news from other indie content creators like B-Check and Tyler D, and Mando Minutes. I mean, these guys are like idols to me. I love their content because they're writing for me as like a crypto native. They're helping me like save
Right.
time and get smart. So that's kind of where I'm operating now. It's like, it's not that I don't care about mass adoption anymore. It's just, I think where I can participate in the highest yield way now is helping crypto builders continue to improve and build, because, ultimately, like, you know, the only way anything transitions from old world to new world here is that we just keep building stuff in this new world. And
Yeah.
for that to happen, we need to save the builders time. We need to get the builders more equipped and smarter. So that's where I'm really operating, is like, how can I really help people like me save time,
Mm.
um, and then never lose sight of the original vision, which I think does go back to these, for me, these three pillars of like decentralization, trustlessness, and permissionless, because we see so many things come and go in this space. And when you peel back the layers, they start to really compromise on one, two, or sometimes all three of these pillars. It's like a
Yeah.
blockchain theater, right? Web two, in disguise. So I try to help crypto natives and just not lose sight of what matters. And if there's somebody new that wants to, join our community, I'll help try to get them up to speed. But, I'm ready to catch them once they're already moving at like 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. There's so much
Yeah.
out there already to like help people from 0 to 30. And I just like, I don't have the time to do that with every individual out there. So like, yeah, people can, get on the highway, hit the gas. And once they're up to speed, I'm here to help them and try to be responsible. And look, it's a tough space. It's full of misinformation. I've certainly made my missteps. Like, we're all victims of, confirmation bias, and all that. But I think you just have to, don't be afraid to put things out there and ship and be wrong. Just try to be intellectually honest. Always seek the truth, and have opinions, but stay open minded, because I think we progress best when we just talk about things out in the open. And sometimes it gets noisy. We've all been on 3 hour long spaces that you don't really get
Oh yeah.
anything out of. But I definitely err on the side of like over communication than not.
I mean, you've definitely contributed a lot to the space, and really appreciate, everything that you've provided, especially over the last year. And I do look at everything as like it's like a university degree. I mean, you pay like tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands sometimes, to like really get educated in a topic of interest. And you speak about the mistakes along the way. Yes, we've all made some mistakes, getting FOMO, pulling out too early, creating losses. But at the end of the day, I think there's so much to be said about just doing. And you can read as much as you want. And I suggest that everybody does read a lot, before putting your money on the line or investing capital. And you should always invest capital that you don't actually, quote unquote, need right now. But I think there's something about just doing and getting involved, and at some point taking that leap of faith. And, there will be losses along the way. There will be gains. There'll be gains in knowledge. There could be gains in capital. But at the end of the day, I've met many great people along the way in this journey, like including yourself. And I really appreciate you for the time that you've given today to try and break down some of these intricacies about the space. And I hope we've kept the altitude kind of high enough, I suppose, for people who are getting interested in joining this space or joining a community to like understand, the potentials of where you could actually go. And so, Valko, thank you. I appreciate all of your time. And where can people find you?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter, just at Valko, Valko. I try to keep that username on most platforms. And then my newsletter is specs.news, specs.news. It's just short for spectacles. I like to use my favorite CryptoPunks attribute, the nerd glasses, as the logo there, maybe with a 1 pixel modification. But write every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. I might not always get it right, but just like doing my best, forcing function to to read every day. I've read enough threads about how Warren Buffett reads for 8 hours a day that, I realize I should probably read a bunch too if I want to be a good investor. But look, man, it's been so awesome talking to you, outside of this podcast, and it's an honor to be a part of this podcast. So thank you so much for inviting me on the show. And yeah, I'll see you around.
I appreciate it. And again, don't forget to subscribe to Specs Daily for more info, and all links will be in the episode description on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening to this episode of Object Subject Form. If you enjoyed the conversation, please rate, subscribe, or leave a comment. It helps us keep the momentum going and reach more like-minded listeners like you. Don't forget to share this episode and follow me using the links in the description to stay connected and join the conversation.